All right, we're back again. Cicadas Cooks. We're going to get working today on a recipe for a gluten-free red velvet cake. Before I start with the putting together the dry ingredients, we're going to get our cake pans ready. And so what I'll do is I'm going to take this is the shape we're going to make it. We're going to make it round. It's going to be 2 rounds. These are 9-inch rounds. And what I do is I just trace around like that. Trace around your paper, or if you don't have the parchment paper, what you want to do is you want to do some pan spray in your pan. You'll want to put some flour in there, and that will kind of act like a parchment paper, okay? So what we'll do next, we get some scissors, and as you see when I trace this, that was the outside of the pan. So what I'm going to do when I cut, I'm going to cut on the inside of the line, okay? We got 2 rounds. I'm going to put that paper over there. I forgot to bring a trash can. So next thing we'll do, since I don't have a pan spray, I'm going to put a little bit of oil in the bottom of each pan. I'll get a little paper towel, and we're just going to spread it around. We're going to spread it on the bottom, and we'll also spread some on the side. We want to make sure that when the cake cooks, that it releases from the side of the pan. So we've got it all nicely oiled up. We put in the bottom of both pans, and the reason we do this with this paper, this is so the cake won't stick to the bottom of the pan. So at the end, when it comes out of the oven, after it cools off, we're ready to take it out, I'll probably just run a knife or a spatula around the side to make sure it's loosened up, just like that. And then over a pan, I'll shake it out, and it should come out really nicely. So the next thing we do, we get going with our ingredients. So we're going to start with 3 cups of gluten-free flour. Thing with gluten-free flour, there's different types. A lot of them now have what they call xanthan gum. And xanthan gum, what it does is it helps bind things together, it helps thicken. But in a cake like this, in the flour, it will act like almost as a gluten without having the gluten in it. Okay? If you buy a gluten-free flour at a grocery store or market, check on it and see if it says it has xanthan gum, then you won't need to add it. This recipe calls for adding xanthan gum, but I know that this flour has xanthan gum in it, so we can omit the step of adding the xanthan gum to it. So we're going to do 3 cups of our gluten-free flour. So remember, we put our flour in, we're going to run something over the top to make sure we get the actual whole cup there. So there's one, I put it into our screen. So we're going to work out any of the clumps, and this screen really comes in handy today because often we're going to add a little bit of chocolate powder to it. And what happens with chocolate powder, it often clumps up. When it sits in your pantry, it will start to clump, and it just over the time it gets a little moisture in the air, and it will kind of clump up, and you'll need to run it through this. So the next thing we add our sugar. So we're going to do 1.5 cups of sugar, and I'll make sure I get it pretty even there. That looks like a cup. And we'll do 1/2 like that. I could do a 1/2 cup measure, but I'm always about speed. And then the next thing we'll do our cocoa powder. So like I said, there might be some of those chunks in there, and look at there are. So I'll reach over here, I'll grab my measuring spoon. We're going to do 2 tablespoons of this cocoa powder, and this is a really nice dark cocoa powder. I love this one. So there's 1 tablespoon. Put it in there, and you see there are a number of chunks in there that are going to, putting it through the screen is really going to help out, and that really prevents your cake from having somebody bite in and getting one big piece of chocolate, unsweetened chocolate. That's never fun to get in your mouth. Next thing we do, we're going to get a teaspoon and a half of baking soda, and a tablespoon is 3 teaspoons, and so I know a teaspoon and a half is 1/2 of a tablespoon. And we're using baking soda, which usually in a cake you would use baking powder, but what happens in the red velvet cake is we're using baking soda and we want kind of a slower action release. And so what we're going to add to our liquids here is some vinegar and buttermilk, and what that does is really releases the steam and the risability of the baking soda when it starts cooking. All right, so that normally in a cake you're going to see baking powder. In this one, we're using baking soda. Okay, so we've got everything. The last thing we need is our salt. So we're going to do we're going to do 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. So I'll just do that little bit. And now we're ready to shake. Shake, shake, shake. All right, so I just hold that down like that and shake it through. And now we can see all of those bits of chocolate that didn't get, that had some moisture in them. And with your fingers, just push that through, okay? Powdered chocolate, dark chocolate like this is pretty expensive, so you want to make sure you get all that through there. And we got most of it through. All right? If it's solid like a rock, you don't want to force it through, okay? But on this one, this wasn't too bad. And what I'll do, I'll just kind of toss it so everything gets mixed together really well. I could run it through that the screen one more time, or with your fingers. Mix it all nice like that. Okay, so it's going to be ready to go as soon as we get our wet ingredients. So I grab a pan, and we're going to start with 3 large eggs. And so if I was doing it right into there, I would crack these eggs into a bowl just in case an eggshell fell out. But in this case, it's the first thing going in there, so if an eggshell falls in here, it's going to be very easy for me to retrieve. And I'm all about retrieving eggshells before I cook anything. It's another thing you don't want to have you don't want little bits of chocolate, unsweetened chocolate, or you don't want eggshells in the cake, all right? So we got our eggs. I'm going to add 1.5 cups of buttermilk. And the buttermilk is part of what will release really get that baking soda going. So we're going to do a 1.5 cups. So I've got that in there. I'm putting it with our other wet ingredients. I'm going to do 2/3 cup of oil, and oil is going to really help the moisture, keep the cake nice and moist, and give it some really nice kind of silky body. Okay, I've got my oil, I got vanilla extract, and I will put in a teaspoon and a half, so that's 1/2 tablespoon. And these are measurements. As you get better, you'll start doing it this way. Right now, go ahead and measure it with a teaspoon. But as I say, do as I say, not as I do, right? Okay, and then red food coloring. I'm using red food coloring. You can get gels sometime, but we're actually using a liquid one. So I'm going to do 2 tablespoons. And just remember, red food coloring is really strong. So the last thing we put in the liquid is our white vinegar. And like I say, the white vinegar helps to release all of the baking soda to really expand. So I got 1 tablespoon right there. So we're ready to go. There's going to be one more ingredient, but we add that at the end when we add it very at the end of this whole process, okay? And that's hot water. One of the reasons being we put hot water in. Hot water really helps this cake. It really gives it the moistness at the end, okay? A gluten-free cake, one problem it has is sometimes they can be kind of dry, and adding hot water to it really helps give the moisture it needs to not be a crumbly cake, okay? So we add all of those wet ingredients in there. I'm going to stir them in. I'm going to make sure I get everything out of the bowl, all those wet ingredients. Those are all those ingredients we already paid for. Don't want to waste them. Okay, so now you have a nice, almost like a pancake batter-ish feel to this. And like I said, the last thing we're going to do, I've got some hot water over here, some boiling water, and we'll add it to it. And we're going to add it slowly. We're going to do 1 cup. So I make sure I get 1 cup. And this is a liquid measure. This one here is a liquid measure as opposed to this, which is a dry measure. And what we'll do now is I'm just going to add it slowly. If you add it too quick, once again, we got some eggs in there, so it might cook some eggs, so you don't want to get little splotches of egg yolk or egg white, okay? So add it slowly. And also, if you add it too fast, it might splash on you. That's hot water. You don't want to get a little burn, or a big burn, or a big bird. Back to my Sesame Street days. Okay, so we got a nice mix, and now it's going to be a little runnier. Still kind of like a thinner pancake batter, but that's a perfect color there. It's nice and ready to go. So what I'll do now is I will, remember we got our pans ready before, and that's the nice thing about getting this stuff ready. Often when I do this, I'll get everything done. I say, oh, I gotta put the paper in there, so that's another step. But when you get it done ahead of time, or if you're lucky, if you're a chef, you can tell one of your workers, can you cut all these and put them in there for me, okay? One of the advantages of being a chef. And what we're gonna do, we're just gonna pour it in there. We wanna do even amounts in each bowl, or each pan. So there we go. We do our best to get them even. And then once you get it all in there, you're just gonna look at it with your eyes, and you're gonna say, okay, that one needs a little more, that one needs a little less. And then the last thing you wanna do, those are pretty even. Oh, I feel pretty good about my success on this. This one has a little bit more, so I'll take a bit out, move it over. Okay, now but before I put these cakes in the oven, really want to taste it to make sure it's sweet. So anyway, so these are ready to go. We're going to put them in the oven about 350. On my oven here, it's a convection oven that we got wind blowing in there. The air is blowing around, hot air. So I'm going to turn it down to 325. It cooks a little quicker when you're using a convection. So we'll put them in there. They're going to cook for probably 30 minutes. I'm going to test them at about 25 minutes. What we'll do, we'll put them in there at about 20 minutes. I'm going to look in. I'm not going to open it. I'll see if it's rounded. But you can also tell if the edges are starting to kind of pull away, then you know that you're really close to being ready. Two ways to test it. You can take a skewer, a bamboo skewer, stick it in the middle, or maybe a kitchen knife, stick it in the middle. If it pulls out and there's still some like uncooked cake on there, it's not ready. But if it pulls out and it's clean, it's ready to go. Another thing I do, I keep a thermometer always in the kitchen. What you can do is you can stick your thermometer right in the middle and make sure you're using, the thermometers have Celsius and Fahrenheit. On Fahrenheit, you want to get it to about 210 degrees, okay? It's at 205, 210. Usually I'll pull it out at 205 degrees, and then it will continue cooking a little bit, but it will be done, ready to go. If you pull your cake out and it's at 300, you've kind of overcooked it. It's probably going to have pulled away from the sides, but it will still be ready. It will just be crumbly, okay? So these are going to go in, and we're going to look at these on our next class and show you, and then we're going to ice them also, okay? So that's it for today. Just remember to get back in the kitchen, sharpen your knives, and start cooking, okay? That's what we're looking for you to do. All right, so we're going to sign out, and we'll see you tomorrow.